Welcome one and all to Last Stop Penn Station podcast featuring Cary Silkin and Ian Riccaboni. They dive deep into Cary's wealth of stories, and no subject is off limits. From the world of wrestling to his ticket agency, growing up in New Jersey, drug-fueled underground days, hustling in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and endless days and nights in New York City, every story is worth telling.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. It is Last Stop Penn Station. Ian Riccaboni, our producer AJ from Basant Creative and Web Design, and our guest of honor, Cary Silkin. How are you, Cary?
I'm okay.
Okay?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm feeling optimistic. We got the vaccine rollout. Seems to be going well. You know, you got your first dose.
I'm going a week from tomorrow, March 10th. We're doing this on a Tuesday night. I'm going March 10th. I believe our producer AJ will have it before then, his second shot.
Awesome.
And so that's exciting. And I saw on the news try to avoid the news sometimes, but it was good news that by June or so, there's going to be enough vaccine for everybody.
There's going to be more vaccine than there are adults, which is in the United States, which is great. I saw Merck and Johnson & Johnson are partnering, and that's unusual. My father worked for Merck, and over the years, they were very competitive. So it's unusual when companies as big as Johnson & Johnson and Merck decide to work together. But it's a great cause to try and get those vaccines manufactured as quickly as possible. So very cool. That was great news all around today.
Yes.
So I'm feeling optimistic, and the weather's getting warmer. The snow's finally melting. I saw grass in my front lawn.
It was cold today.
It was cold.
Tomorrow's supposed to be tomorrow's supposed to be in the make it into the 50s, and then it's going to be no snow, but it's going to be in the 40s where we live for a number of days. And next week, when I see you next Tuesday, it might, not in the evening, but it's possibly going to get to 60 during the day.
Wow.
So no chance of any snow. We'll probably get 2 feet.
I'll tell you, that's what it seems to be in March. You know, the second week of March, it always seems to, all hell breaks loose.
Well, I remember 2 opening day Yankee games that I was going to that were not rained out, snowed out.
Wow.
It was in the 90s or early 2000s. But yeah, let's see what else we could talk about besides the weather.
Sure.
How about the championship watch party?
Oh, that was great. 2 great matches, the tag team championships. Dragon Lee and Kenny King, a team you don't see often, sneaking in a victory.
Yeah, very underhanded in both matches.
Yeah.
I'll just talk to Todd Sinclair if I ever get to see him.
Right. It's like Gorilla Monsoon used to say, you need 2 referees out there, which Dave Meltzer confirmed at one point was very common for tag team matches. So maybe we need to bring it back for Ring of Honor.
Yeah. That was a great match. And then the title match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shane Taylor's really stepping up his game, taking it to a different level. And I wish Roosh wouldn't feel the need to use everything around the ring, the chairs, the
not
cords.
Cool.
Yeah, he doesn't need to, but he knows that if he gets disqualified, he keeps the title. So I guess in his mind, he's going to take it as far as it goes.
And now my good friend Amy Rose is like the greatest manager
of all time. Yeah, has 3 championships simultaneously, no less. So it's one of these things where, I mean, she's done something that, you know, Jim Cornette managed the Briscoes to the championships early on, and Truth Martini managed Jay Lethal to the TV and the world title. But not many people, nobody has done it.
So she's got the tag team champions.
Got the tag team champions.
The 6-man?
No,
not the 6-man.
The TV and the world.
It's incredible.
Yeah, unbelievable for somebody that's this new onto the scene. She's the brains behind the operations with La Fascion Ingobernable. So coming up this week, we're going to see a pure match between Josh Woods and Dalton Castle. And then we're going to see a four-corner survival. One fall to a finish. Matt Taven, Jay Briscoe, Jay Lethal, and EC3 returning to ROH television to compete. Winner goes on, gets a world title shot. And the rumor is the winner goes on to the anniversary event on March 26th to cash that in.
And I was just going to mention the 19th anniversary of Ring of Honor coming up. It's on the 26th on pay-per-view.
Pay-per-view, Fight TV. All Honor Club members get it absolutely free. It comes complimentary with your subscription.
I spoke to Joe Koff today.
Oh, all right.
And I'm getting the shot that, I don't want to start talking about my medical problems here, but I'm getting the shot the 10th. I might as well. I talk about everything else. I'm getting the shot the 10th. And you're supposed to wait 2 weeks after the shot if you really, really wanted to be safe. And Joe, who's a couple years older than me, said who lives there, and it's his company, he's not going.
Okay.
Because he's getting the shot, a couple days before, maybe the end of the week. Point is that he'd rather play it on the safe side. And I told him I wanted to go, but I don't know if I'm ready. And they went out of their way to make some, is provisions the right word?
Yeah.
So I didn't have to go with Mr. Bubble.
Sure.
And so hopefully I will be there in May, and things might be much more relaxed.
Right.
Even for young, healthy people like you and all the wrestlers.
Yeah, I'll still be wearing a mask, that's for sure, even hopefully after I get the vaccine. My wife is getting it tomorrow as we record. She's getting the first dose. So that's exciting. And my sister's been fully inoculated, my sister-in-law, my brother. So things are looking up. But yeah, I think I'm still going to wear a mask for a little bit because you can still pass it on even if you don't feel the symptoms of it.
Good thing we're not in Texas.
Yeah, right. Oh, geez. Yeah, we're thinking about you, Texas.
Sorry for our many Texas listeners and our friend Stu Myrick.
Right.
But, come on.
Yeah, just be thoughtful of one another and take CDC precautions as you go out and about. We know this is, it's been almost a year since me and Todd Sinclair dropped you off at the airport and waved goodbye. So, man, I can't wait. The 18th anniversary was going to be so much fun, but the 19th anniversary, going in with Roosh as the champion, with Dragon Lee and Kenny King as the tag team champions, and it looks like Jonathan Gresham's going to hold on to the pure title, and I've been told he'll defend it. Shane Taylor Promotions defending the 6-man titles. It's going to be a hell of a night.
Yeah, it's a good card. It's more than a good card. It's an excellent card, and let's see what happens. Not to push things too far in advance, but let's hope that at the time of the 20th, at monumental 20th anniversary, we could do it in some semblance in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
We're talking 13 months from now.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think spring will come again.
Spring will come again.
As the great 80s Town musical once said. But Cary, last week, we're talking about the future. Let's go back in time now. Last week, we were talking about the Lehigh Valley, coming to the Lehigh Valley. You're teasing me. You're stringing me along with Disney World. You said there's a Disney World story.
I got a Disney World story for you, but I got a story before this.
Okay.
Before I'm cutting you off.
All right, that's all right.
Yeah. We needed to real quick mention, please check out the 55 and 5, Ian's brainchild.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun looking at these wrestlers from the 1955 Parkhurst Wrestling Series from Canada, where I have problems with just about all of them. And it's on the Ad Free Shows network.
It is. If you want a binge audio format, head on over to Ad Free Shows. They're always free. Some of the content with Jim Ross, Tony Schiavone, you got to pay a little extra to get the extra content, but their basic shows are free, and ours are as well. As well as the posters of the week, which we supply. Yeah. And it's a fun extra for these people. We just did the
the charitable posters.
Right.
Donna Stutz.
You're not going to want to miss this. I'll tell you, folks. That's make sure. And the way you can do that, you can go follow Ad Free Shows on Twitter. They post a link. It's an quote unquote unlisted YouTube link, which means anybody who has the link can watch it for free. And they post it. So I usually add those to my playlist on my page, youtube.com/Ian Riccaboni. That's where you get the 55 videos. And so you can see the cards as we're talking about them. And that's where you can see all the posters of the week. We have a nice handy playlist. Just click on it. You can watch them all.
Very good. But before we head to Disney World, maybe I had this. Somehow we did we're always trying to mention these things that we watch or we don't watch, like One Night in Miami. But
those Disney infomercials were just calling my name, Cary.
There's almost a follow-up piece to One Night in Miami, which is, have you seen the ads for Judas and the Black Messiah?
No.
Which is on HBO, and it's about Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers in Chicago.
Wow.
And it's all true. This guy was only 21 years old. We're talking in the time of, Angela Davis and the Black Panthers. Not that they were the greatest guys. Their cause was a little bit radical. But the FBI, led by J. Edgar Hoover, of course, and the Chicago police.
J. Edgar Hoover, a little bit radical himself.
Absolutely.
As we know.
And the Chicago police, freshly coming off the 68 Democratic Convention.
Right.
With that horror show, which led to the Chicago 7, which included Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin, and what was the name of the Black Panther? Bobby Seals. And Judas and the Black Messiah, really, really good. I watched it with our producer AJ. It's a good thing he's around, or I'd have no one to watch these with. But we've been watching music stuff primarily, and we took a turn for something serious. Mike G suggested it to us, and it was really, really good. Not to mention, hold on, not to mention, about the original Rolling Stone, Brian Jones?
Oh,
the guitar player.
I don't believe I do.
I got the first name right, don't I? Yeah, Brian Jones basically started the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
And he was a couple years older than Jagger, Richards, Wyman, and Watts. And as all these bands like the Beatles, and then going on to the English bands, Cream and Floyd and Zeppelin and so on and so forth, one guy knew another guy who knew another guy from these clubs. And Brian Jones, he was like the one guy in the Stones who had, he was a composer, and he had some musicality to him. Not that Keith Richards didn't play guitar good, or Mick Jagger didn't sing good, but they didn't do original songs in the beginning. And Brian Jones was the first one, Painted Black. I'm blanking out. Be that as it may, and obviously leading to Satisfaction, which was their first huge worldwide hit. But Brian Jones wound up mysterious. He took the path of drugs, and they sort of wanted to get rid of him. He became trouble. This was 1968, and he was found under mysterious circumstances in his swimming pool, dead.
Oh no!
In like May or June of 68, or maybe it was even. The Stones had a show July 5th in Hyde Park. There was a free show. That was the first show, and his replacement was Mick Taylor. So we put this documentary on just thinking it was going to tell us about Jones, but it turned into a real... you could say conspiracy theory, but very, very interesting circumstances. Like it wasn't so case closed that this guy just, he was on a lot of drugs and he was just messed up and he drowned.
Yeah.
And it was a real eye opener. Nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
So
sounds a lot like Keith Moon and Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, who both died by drowning.
And it was, well, let's not forget, although they didn't drown, or maybe they drowned in their own puke, was, you got Joplin, Hendrix, and Jim Morrison, who died within 6 months of each other. The famous 27 Club.
Right.
Was Brian Jones. Brian Jones was 27 too.
Oh, geez.
And Kurt Cobain.
Right.
So that was really good. The last of my rock and roll stuff, and I read this book about the Fillmore East and West, which was owned by Bill Graham. Mm-hmm. You know who that is? The famous promoter?
The promoter, yeah.
Right. Bill Graham, he ruled with an iron fist. The reason I wanted to look into it was because after talking in some of our previous episodes about the Led Zeppelin book and then that Peter Grant book, their manager that was a pro wrestler in England,
right,
and how this guy was just a 6 foot. He was like he's 601 pounds. He was 20 stone, 6'4", 20 stone, and so like in the Peter Grant book, there's a big thing in there where he tells when Led Zeppelin 2 is huge, he tells Bill Graham, I'm not. And the other U.S. promoters. This is all urban legend, let's just say, that instead of a 60-40 split, which they did often with the house, with the buildings, he wanted a 90-10 split. Now, after reading that and knowing a little bit about Bill Graham, because he was tough, Bill Graham came out of his family, they were German Jews, and he escaped Germany in 1940, came to the U.S. His parents were killed. He was put in some youth home in the Catskills, and he was adopted by these people that lived in the Bronx. And he grew up, he learned English, and he grew up in the 50s. Who was a great hustler. He used to work, they had those Catskills, the resorts in the Catskills. Yeah. They used to call it the Borscht Belt. Oh. It was like the Jewish people would go, like my parents would call it the Borscht Belt. There were these nightclubs, and he used to work there. And he would run crap games afterwards, like with the staff. And he wasn't really a partier, but he was a hustler, and he made money, lost money, traveled around like you're supposed to do when you're in your 20s. And he wound up out in California, and he got into the music business. And he eventually owned Winterland, which was almost a 5,000 seat theater in San Francisco. And he was managing or advising with the Dead and Janis Joplin and Jefferson Airplane. And he had a falling out with them. And when the falling out happened, the Dead, using the money of Owsley, who made the LSD. Oh. They bought the building that became the Fillmore West. So the Dead owned this building and had a different name. Bill Graham made amends with them. So he had both buildings and would book the Dead, and as well as Jefferson Airplane. And when he was in New York and he was growing up, his one love, so we're talking like 10, 12, 15 years before this rock and roll, he loved Latin music. And he would go out, to like Roseland. They would have a Latin night, Xavier Cugat and Desi Arnaz, right? And he just loved it. So when Santana appeared on the San Francisco scene, he basically managed and guided them. And, Carlos Santana, I learned this all from this book. His father was a musician, and Carlos was playing guitar when he was like 12, 13 years old. And they were in Mexico, in Tijuana, and he was working these whorehouses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is what he was seeing at 12, 13, 14. Oh. And a man came over the border and would bring Carlos back to the U.S., and it was he was abused. Oh. Santana talks about it now. Took him 40 years to talk about this.
Wow.
And but there's just so anyway. Bill Graham had the Fillmore West, had the Winterland, but New York City in the later 60s didn't have venues except these larger clubs. So there was an abandoned theater. The Beacon was closed.
Okay.
Your beloved Palladium was closed. And there was a theater on 2nd Avenue between 6th and 7th Street that used to be a Yiddish theater. We mentioned this on a previous podcast, but that became the Fillmore East. Wow. Where he ran shows. He was flying back and forth. There was the shows were on the weekends usually. And you would have acts like Bonnie Raitt opening for Elton John, followed by Iron Butterfly. But then the Late Show was Traffic, and then Led Zeppelin, then Jackson Brand, whatever. It was just all crazy. But the book's great, and the thing that really, there's so many things I could just go on about, but Grace Slick from The Airplane. Yeah. Now you think of Joplin. She's wild. Right. And they talk about her. She was just wild. And the Dead, at all their shows, these guys were mean. You say, sometimes you say, I'm mean with my nicknames. These guys were terrible. Why? They would just be dosing acid. Oh, geez. In like the water coolers. In people's, and Bill Graham knew this. So he used to have his own stash. He'd like to drink 7-Up. But, so what they eventually did to get him? One of their guys took a hypodermic needle with LSD.
What the hell?
And put it in the 7-Up in the cans that was undetectable.
Holy crap.
And one night he was tripping and the Dead were on. And when he was he knew that. He's like, they got me, those motherfuckers. And so what happened was he was on the side of the stage and Mickey Hart, one of the drummers, Bill Kreutzmann and Mickey Hart, just looks over at him. And you feared Bill Graham, and he's just looking at him. And Bill Graham was just like looking back at him, like, you got me. So Mickey Hart's like, and the Dead are in one of these obnoxious long jams. And Bill Graham said he walked back behind Mickey Hart, and Mickey Hart goes, pick up a cowbell. And he sat there for 4 hours. 4 hours cowbelling and tripping his balls off. He was cowbelling when the song stopped. But yeah, there's so many stories. But I mentioned Grace Slick. And I had to make a couple now. She was, boys and girls, she was the lead singer of Jefferson Airplane. You might have heard the song White Rabbit. Yes. You might have heard the song Somebody to Love. Yes. And there's a couple stories, and I just made some real quick notes, and we'll move on. They booked, Bill Graham got them on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Oh, okay. This was huge. Yeah. This is when Somebody to Love was a huge hit, right? So she's on the Tonight Show. Now it's lip synced. Okay. And as you would often see with these variety shows, they have some kind of prop. In this case, it was a little merry-go-round carousel.
Oh.
And Spencer Dryden and Jorma Kaukonen and the drummer, whoever that was, were surrounding this. And it was a lip-sync version of Somebody to Love. Mm-hmm. And instead of Grace Slick singing it to the audience, she walked over to where Johnny, the table, the table and couch, and sang it to Johnny.
Oh, wow.
Who was like,
"What are you doing?"
Yeah, absolutely. And I looked all over YouTube. There's no video of it. But if that wasn't enough, when the song crescendoed, as it was coming to the end of it, she walked back over. Johnny Carson's like, "Thank God." And as it's like, dun, 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 bah, she took her mic and went up to one of the carousel horses and made like she was sticking the mic in one of the horses' asses.
Oh, God. No wonder you can't find it.
Right. So that's just one moment with her. Another moment, I don't know why he would do it because he was sharp, but they got booked, but they were in New York. Bill Graham had something to do with the Whitney Museum.
Okay.
Which I think is an art museum.
Yeah.
And they had the airplane go there with all the wealthy, the hoi polloi, and it was not, or there had to be other acts. It was not a Jefferson Airplane crowd. And when she was besides all the drugs she took, her drug of choice was alcohol. And she came out and she looked at these people, guys, and they were dressed formally, mm-hmm. and these women in nice gowns, and these men in suit, and men in a tux. And she looks out and she goes, looks at with this one woman, and she goes, and she sort of looks at all the women and goes, she says, "Your men wouldn't know a clit from a junk bond. You should show them your pussy more often."
Oh,
that was the opening of the show.
Wow, that'll wake you up.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So,
holy moly.
Right. That was, and another odd thing, this might be around. I got to look. The 1968 Olympics with the Black Power?
Right.
Right. Mm-hmm. Tommy, what was his name? I forget one of the guys, but she came on the Smothers Brothers, mm-hmm. and she had the black glove, but against the advice of all the people in the band, she wore blackface.
Oh.
Right. And she thought this is like, a protest. Oh. And it wasn't anti.
Yeah.
But she was misguided. She was so twisted.
Yeah.
And then she gave the Black Power salute.
That would have been plenty.
At the end of that.
The glove would have been plenty with the Black Power salute. Didn't need to do that.
Right. So, yeah. There's a little on Grace Slick. There's a little on Fillmore, East and West. There's so many good stories in that. Very, very interesting. But I know you want to get to Disney World.
Well, I got something I found. I always look for weird things on the internet.
Yes.
Including Disney infomercials, so to speak. There's a show I found. I'm going to put you on the spot. We haven't talked about this. A show called Turn On. And it was done. Albert Brooks was one of the writers. It was on 1969. It's one of the only shows that got canceled as it was airing for the first time.
Now, Albert Brooks, I'm usually good with this era of names. Was he a comedian?
He was in
writer, actor.
What was that? Broadcast News. He was in Broadcast News.
Okay.
He was in. He was very young. He was, I think, 19 or 20. So it was 1969, I think. And it's fascinating. It's once the pandemic breaks, apparently the Museum of Television in New York has 2 episodes, and the first episode in most markets didn't finish. It was canceled as it was airing. It was too bawdy, too sexual. A lot of the things that you described, Grace Slick. It was kind of a bang bang sensory overload sketch show. And it was done
sort of like a R-rated Laugh-In.
Yeah, well, Laugh-In was some of the writers were from Laugh-In. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was just bang, 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 sensory, and it was done completely white background, completely white soundstage. So it's fascinating, and there's like a 60-second kind of retrospective of it from ABC from like 10 years ago. It's the only footage
How'd
that's
you
on
come
YouTube.
across that?
I got on a weird tangent where I was looking for, lost media.
Okay.
And it was on one of the things that said, well, what about this show? And there's very funny clippings in the newspaper about all these station managers. Apparently the skit that was over the top was there was a cigarette dispenser. And instead of selling cigarettes, it sold birth control. And apparently that's when the switchboards lit up. And that's when many markets decided, hey, we're pulling this off the air.
Was this maybe broadcast live at the time?
No, it was on ABC. It ran for one episode, but there's a couple taped, but two are known to exist. So they had musical guests. They would have had musical guests and everything. I think the Byrds were actually scheduled to be on it down the road. And never
I'll
happened.
definitely have to check that out.
Yeah.
Just like last week when I toyed with this Fillmore thing I mentioned that led me to the Dick Cavett stuff.
Right.
Which is really fascinating. If you're ever bored, look up Dick Cavett. If you like this kind of stuff, whether it's John Lennon, whether it's that Lester Maddox and Jim Brown.
Right.
Classic. And I saw a good one with Groucho Marx and just really, really interesting, very interesting stuff. That late 60s, early 70s era was just so rich with is that the only period where there was the last explosion? Someone's going to argue with me, well, what about the disco explosion? What about the punk explosion? What about the grunge explosion of the early 90s? And there was a lot of great bands came out of that. But there was such a boom period, not just for music, but for art, and just things were changing so fast.
Yeah, I think art often reflects what's going on in the world. And I think the rapid change, whether it was in Vietnam, whether it was here, civil rights, a lot of the Band-Aids were being torn off quickly. The Lyndon Johnson, a lot of people talk so much about Kennedy. Lyndon Johnson was the one that signed a lot of legislation.
Yeah, but he wasn't the best guy.
No, he wasn't. No, you don't get credit for the big achievement if you're not good along the way. But all of that change happened rather quick and rather fast. And talk about mysterious deaths. There's a lot of mysterious deaths along the way.
Which leads us back to Nixon. Johnson was smart enough to know. I mean, he was like the dirtiest player in the game.
Right. People
don't understand, and I didn't know until I really researched it. He was a Democratic candidate for the 1960 election. Mm-hmm. He became a Democratic candidate at the convention.
Didn't know this.
And Adlai Stevenson was going to run, and then right. Kennedy was going to use Adlai Stevenson as for vice president.
And Stevenson had lost to Eisenhower.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then Kennedy realized, oh, shit, we need, they were Irish. Yes, they were Irish Catholic family, which at the time was like being, black or Jewish, and they're not going to win any of these southern states. Mm-hmm. And they basically made a deal with Johnson. They were, so that's how, which of course leads to the Kennedy conspiracy, which, if you're going to have a coup d'etat, you got to have the right man. And Johnson, he was there. I'm never going to get to Disney World, but that's all right. It's last night, there's a show on HBO about the FBI, but it's about errors. And the one I watched was about what was going on with the FBI and during Watergate. Mm. And this was J. Edgar Hoover's last stand. Mm. But what happened was, Watergate happened, I could look it up, but it was May or June of 72. Mm-hmm. the break-in was front page news, and it was attached to Nixon at the Democratic headquarters in Watergate. Watergate is the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. It was broken into, and the guys all gave fake names, but they were all identified. And, H.R. Haldeman, Frank Sturgis, who's associated with the Kennedy murder, E. Howard Hunt, who's associated with the Kennedy murder. All these guys were lifetime spooks. And, going back to with Cuba and the Bay of Pigs, and we're going to get Castro and dirty deeds done dirt cheap. So when the Watergate break-in happened, Nixon won the election.
Landslide.
Right.
One of the biggest victory of all time.
Just a few months later. And what happened was he had put the taping system in the White House in 1971. Everything, it was the stupidest move ever. I don't know what advantage I guess he was so paranoid.
Right.
But everything was recorded, including, did they know who broke in? And so, but he had Hoover on his side until J. Edgar Hoover suddenly died in like 1973. And Nixon didn't leave office till 2 years later.
Right.
They were going to, it's just fascinating.
Yeah.
John Dean, you know who that is, right?
Deep Throat.
Well, Dean, you see him on CNN sometimes, they bring him on.
Right.
Dean was a young man then, and Dean testified, and these other guys testified, and Nixon resigned and was pardoned by Gerald Ford is the only person to become vice president and president without being elected to either.
Amazing.
Because Spiro Agnew,
he got thrown out for taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
So fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Gerald Ford has a history of failing upward. That became a running joke on SNL, obviously the early days of Saturday Night Live, but there are some things in his life too. If you look further, he was always, when he played football in college, he became the starter because some other guy had this freak accident. There's like this series of things in Gerald Ford's life where something happens and suddenly he gets the ball.
Well, if you tuned into Last Stop Penn Station for some light wrestling talk or hearing dirty stories about the 70s and 80s, we apologize.
Well, we can get back there.
We're gonna, but this is all good stuff. It's interesting.
And how about the rest? Let's tie it back to wrestling, right? Do you remember who was at WrestleMania 2? These people not only were excommunicated, they should have been excommunicated because the biggest crime, one of the biggest crimes in the United States history. But Vince McMahon brings in, do you know who? He brought in Herb the Burger King guy. He brings in Claire, the Where's the Beef lady, for WrestleMania 2.
Who you come?
G. Gordon Liddy.
Really?
Yeah, G. Gordon Liddy comes out at WrestleMania 2, waves to everybody.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I know a lot of people listening, or thousands of listeners.
Yeah.
These names, you got to look up these people. I'm going to continue. I'm sorry, but you probably didn't know the name Frank Sturgis.
I've heard the name. I remember Mr. Barna would not be happy with me right now. He taught us who Frank Sturgis was in U.S. history.
After I saw this fascinating Watergate thing, AJ, you got to see this thing, and you got to see this too. Yeah. It's only 50 minutes. And it was like part one. I went on YouTube, and I'm like, there's no way that there might be a little bio about Frank Sturgis. Well, in 1976, he served time in jail after the Watergate. Mm-hmm. They sent him to like one of these
low security.
Yeah. But Frank Sturgis came on the Geraldo Rivera show.
Of course he did.
Geraldo Rivera,
who's had G. Gordon Liddy many times, but that's not neither here nor there.
In 76, this is when they had these Senate they were reinvestigating the Kennedy murder.
Mm-hmm.
And Sam Giancana had died, and Johnny Roselli, Johnny Roselli was the mafia king, allegedly, of Miami,
Mm-hmm.
and Sam Giancana of Chicago. And they were both supposed to testify, as well as Charles Nicoletti, as well as this one, as well as that one. They all were killed. And before the Senate subcommittee, which found it to be a conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, Frank Sturgis, he was associated. Rivera has on this comedian to start the show. It was a very complete show. He did a good job. The first guest was a comedian who was who used to work before the strippers came out at the Carousel Club, where Jack Ruby, the man who shot Oswald,
right,
where he owned.
Mm-hmm.
He had this night, and Ruby wasn't his last name.
Mm-hmm.
He was Rubenstein.
Mm-hmm.
He was associated with the Chicago mob, but he was Jewish. You're not going to become a made man. But he ran guns to Cuba. He did this. He did that. He was in trouble with on both sides, with the Dallas police and the boys, allegedly. And so this guy was a comedian and opened the shows for these strippers that would come out. And the question was from Geraldo, did you see Lee Harvey Oswald at Jack Ruby's club? And he's like, twice. Huh. And he went into, this is 2 weeks and 4 weeks before the murder.
Oh, wow.
Ruby has Oswald in his club.
Jeez.
Right. And, at least for me, it's fascinating. The next guest was Jack Ruby's sister.
Oh.
This lady who's my brother. He might have had strippers. He might have flown on vacation to Cuba.
It's shot Oswald in cold blood on live television. Yeah.
But yeah, he was patriotic. That's why he shot him. Well, where I'm leading to is the next guest is Frank Sturgis.
Huh.
I couldn't believe it. Like, was he there as like a false, like, a de-information?
Yeah.
But he was talking about, Castro's role in the Kennedy thing. And he didn't, when Geraldo Rivera asked him about the mafia, that's when he did a about face. Yeah. But Frank Sturgis, and he was also on, one of these other shows, but real, these are classic friggin' spooks, man.
Yeah. Oh, geez.
Yeah, really interesting.
Oh, man.
I find it interesting.
Yeah. And could you describe that word just in case anybody thinks who is not familiar that are Caucasian, just in case they think you're using that derogatory, just so.
A spook is a black op. It's for spooky. Mm-hmm. And there were these guys that they would keep off the books. Mm. So in other words, Frank Sturgis was connected to the CIA. Mm-hmm. He was connected to the FBI. He sort of had connections at the Secret Service. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't on their books.
Right.
Just like the great David Ferry, from that Joe Pesci plays in the Kennedy, and G. Gordon Liddy.
Right.
And these guys, they just, Nixon surrounded himself with these classic spooks.
Yeah.
They could get information. Mm-hmm. They knew, dirty deeds done dirt cheap once again. Mm-hmm. But the Watergate break-in, there were so many blunders. It's like they wanted to get caught.
Yeah, that's
about that?
That's the most interesting thing to me. There was a number of times they should have gotten caught and did. They were just very easily discovered.
Right.
So it's almost that there's part of me that there's a conspiracy that maybe Nixon had flipped on them or something too, and who knows? I don't think we'll ever know.
Well, we may never know. And we still want to get to Disney World here.
Yeah.
We were talking about me coming out, working with Farrell.
Lehigh Valley area.
Yeah, and we were also talking about these ticket we got on a thing in previous Last Stop Penn Stations. We talked about digging for tickets at the Madison Square Gardens and the Meadowlands and the Radio Cities, and that whole ordeal of doing that. And later, when Ticketron went to Ticketmaster, there were lots of Ticketmaster machines around, but the better seats were still at the arena box offices, whether it was the Allentown Fairgrounds,
Sure,
whether it was the Spectrum, whether it was the multi-named Meadowlands Arena
Continental.
Brendan Byrne,
yeah. The United, it became Continental then United, I think, at one point.
Right, that was gone completely.
Right.
And so when these shows would go, now that there were Ticketmasters around, you had a good chance to get some good seats, or in a case of a huge show. And we were talking about Alice in Chains last time because they were huge at the time. Bands like that, or Soundgarden, would play Roseland.
Yeah.
It held like 3,000 people. So if there were 50 Ticketmaster machines and it was an 8, maybe, all right, we'll say a 4 ticket limit, because let's say it was, Soundgarden and they're red hot. What year were they big, AJ, in their earliest?
Probably 90, 91.
Right, fine. So it would go on sale. So there's the first punch, 50 times 4, that's,
200.
Right. And Roseland probably had a sale going on at the building too. So maybe the Ticketmasters only had 1,200 seats. So within a few punches, they were gone.
Yeah.
And in preparing to do this, and it's hard to put this in a succinct manner, I spoke to 3 friends of mine who were involved in the ticket business. They all wish to remain anonymous after these stories.
Sure.
But the point was that whether it was right or wrong, every Ticketmaster machine was corrupt. Every one of them. So, and I had mentioned last week, I knew this, and sometimes would send a crew of kids, go to this one in Bordentown, New Jersey. But it was inevitably corrupt. And it would have to be a show didn't matter what tickets you would get.
Yeah.
And I was, one of my friends, we'll call him Tony, I was talking to, he was, we most of the Ticketmasters, they were either in these record stores and head shop kind of places.
Sure.
But then they were in the Bambergers or the Hesses.
Yeah, Hess had it. Strawberry and Clothier.
Right.
Yeah.
These big department store boys and girls. And they were also at every Tower Records when Tower Records existed. There was Tower Records, I think, but when you were in school, was it on 4th Street? There was Tower Records?
Yeah. So when I was at NYU, it was 4th Street and Broadway. Yeah.
And it was Tower Records, Tower Books.
Tower Books. And there was the Virgin Megastore, which also had the Ticketmaster. That was probably a little bit after your time, but those were huge. And there was one in Union Square and Times Square.
Well, I spoke to the guy today. I'll get back to Tony, this guy Dave, who at one point in time had the Tower Records store. When I say he had it, he would get the tickets from there. And once in a while, like sometimes the brokers themselves would operate the machine. So first of all, they're operating the machine, and this is without the program, Farrell. This is just straight operate the machine. Then they would stack the line.
Oh.
At first, it was first come, first serve.
Mm-hmm.
So then, in order to not have like a crew of kids or guys that someone sent, like Freddie the Weeper sent, like, the Mummy and Tommy Indio and Droopy Al. Oh, get there at 9. Get there at 10 p.m. Oh, maybe you should get there at 8 p.m. The sale was 8
in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
So if these guys would go to the store and be literally first online,
mm-hmm.
well, what the stores did eventually, they wouldn't open the door till 5 after 10 or 5 after 9, whatever the time of the sale was. There would be buckets of tickets pulled by all, But what they did to even stack the deck more.
Which is the name of my theme song in Ring of Honor. I didn't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Stack the deck, yes.
Right. Well, so what they did was, and they did this in the car, they would hand out wristbands or numbers.
They still,
So they would hand, here's you got number 61. Oh, you got the number that was picked would be the Ticketmaster operator's first 7 bums he had there.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just the way it was. And so I was talking to the guy who actually had that Tower Records.
Okay.
And he's like, oh, Jesus Christ. He goes, at one point before the wristbands, when the machine would print out the tickets, it'd be like, it was loud, like, and like the guys on the line going, hey, there's tickets coming. He's like, no, the machine it's just warming up. Like, it's incredible. Let it warm up. The guy's there waiting to buy Ozzy Osbourne. He's been waiting. And so also at that Tower Records, they realized that where the machine was, they had those big plate glass windows.
Yeah, it was a beautiful building.
Right?
Yeah.
They would have the posters of the various hot record acts.
Yeah.
So he realized, oh shit, the people could see him behind the machine.
Right.
So they had to put up whatever.
Oasis poster.
Right.
Yeah.
Blocking that. That was funny. Then my friend Tony was telling me regarding these department stores.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of his guys, it was in the North Jersey area, might have been the old school, was Bamberger's still around?
It might have been.
Yeah, well, it was around this time. So he knew the guy that had the Bamberger's could get seats for the Bamberger's machine. And it was a big show. It was like Pink Floyd doing, with Roger, the first time Roger Waters and David Gilmour had come back together in many years.
Huge.
And they're playing Giant Stadium. And so at this particular store, which was like in Paramus or somewhere, there's like 100 people outside. Well, the guy snuck them in through like the side door.
Whoa.
An employee entrance.
Yeah. So
Tony tells me, so, the thing's punching the seats out. They open the door at like, 4 after 9 or whatever the time was, 4 after 10. And he says, and I have me and 7 guys who are there. And there comes a thundering herd.
Oh, no.
So eventually after the 7th person, would get, and like, as the bogus person was getting their tickets, the more were being printed out.
Oh, God.
More were being printed out. And so when finally the first legitimate person would get there, they just didn't really have a chance.
Oh.
Another friend of mine, Gary, what he did, him and his partner There's a guy, Napkin.
No, first time for Napkin, I think.
The great Napkin. They were smart. It didn't last long, but they bought a video store in a bad neighborhood of the Bronx.
Huh.
And Gary, I spoke to him a couple days ago. He said, the only reason, I go, but wasn't it in a bad neighborhood? He goes, yeah. He goes, but it was safe. I go, well, what do you mean? It's an oxymoron. He goes, no. The drug dealers were on the corner, so they made sure there was no trouble. And he says to me, nobody would come to this machine.
Wow.
I go, come on. There's some of these scalping crews, which there's some classic, and there were good guys, and it was just his name, Black George, and there was Doug, and they were African American, but they had their shit together. So guys like them, they might come to the machine and be like, hey, we want to get something.
Yeah.
And because Gary was telling me nobody ever came. I'm like, someone had to come.
Sure.
And if you have Barbara Streisand going on sale after 25 years,
Yeah,
someone's going to come.
Big return.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all these machines were corrupt.
Amazing. And you started to tell us last week about a little store with an elderly woman who was running that machine. And was it Baby Dumplings who tried to grease her?
That was Prozie's.
Prosie.
The Weeper, besides that, the Weeper had a connection at the Meadowlands.
Okay.
He used to say, oh, the old guys. Freddie was very fair to these guys. Oh, the old man's going to pull seats. And this is, I'm jumping ahead, but when I opened Rave Review in 98, this is when Monday Night Raw and WCW were huge.
Oh, we had to stand in line and wait for tickets. And
well, the old man at the Meadowlands, where I took AJ and his son one time many years ago for WWF, the old man would pull like 16 front rows and 16 second rows, and Freddie be like, oh, should I get they were only like $30. Should I maybe I shouldn't get the second row. I'm like, get him.
Yeah.
He goes, can he get, he probably could have got more.
Yeah.
But the guy just yanked him.
Wow.
And Freddie paid him accordingly. And we made a lot of money from those at that time with those tickets. I remember Monday Night Raw in its peak, and I started Rave Review in 98. I know we're jumping around here, but that's okay. I started Rave Review in 98, and I had Matt and Joe, who still works with me, and we went to the Monday Night Raw, and I saved, we got big money. We got like $400 a piece for the front row. Wow. And 300 second row. This is a year. This only lasted for like a year.
Sure.
But this was front row center, second row center.
Wow.
So there was a guy who used to call us for tickets. He had some kind of gardening, landscaping business in Staten Island. Oh. And this guy spent money. And it was a great customer. And his kids loved wrestling. And he used to like to go to see the Giants, and his wife wanted tickets for her flavor of the day.
Celine Dion.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I need 4 Celine Dions. They got to be in the, they're going to be like 400. I just sent them to me, right? Well, the guy, can't remember his name, but the place was in Staten Island. He had a name like Garupolis or something, like Garupolis Gardening. So I go there with Joe and Matt. I should find the show because we were on the hard camera side.
Oh, wow.
And Garupolis And he bought 8 seats.
Wow.
You know, I said, well, second row, instead of $350, just you're getting 8 of them, just give me 3 apiece. All right, fine. So we're at the show. And I say to Matt and Joe, I go, I think that's the guy behind us, you know. And Matt's like, yeah. We had section B, row 1 and 2. I go, that must be that Garoopoulos, because there were like 2 adults, 2 men, like in their 40s. You know, and at the time you could smoke in the building. Okay. These were like cigar chomping. And they had like his daughter, foul-mouthed daughter. It listed at around 99, 2000, you know, so was The Rock hot then?
Yeah, The Rock was hot. Steve Austin.
Who was the bad guys?
Triple H, Vince McMahon, Undertaker.
Yeah, like Triple H. She'd be like, you fuck, you know.
She was probably a teenager, right?
Garoopoulos, he wouldn't say nothing. And yeah, she was a teenager, but their fathers.
Right, just right there.
So anyway, I was going to turn around to introduce myself. Hey, thank you, you know.
Yeah.
And good thing I didn't.
Oh.
Because although he wasn't necessarily angry at me, because he was like right behind me, him and his friend. And the daughters and her foul-mouthed teenage friends were down right next to him. Garoopoulos says to his friend, and it's only been like a half hour into the show, goes, Jesus fucking Christ, I spent $2,400 for this shit. So at that point, I said, I better not introduce myself. Never complained, though. He would call. So all these places were corrupt. And then there was the gimmick that Farrell had that saved you the trouble of keeping the people, having to stack the line, because that little gimmick, when hooked to the Ticketmaster computer, I mean, these people were jeopardizing their Ticketmasters and what they were doing.
Yeah.
And eventually Ticketmaster sent plants to stand there. And, you know, and as the 90s went on, they wanted to get rid of the mom and pop stores.
Yeah.
And then they only had the Ticketmasters in these chain stores.
Right.
And now there's not any.
Yeah.
But this program that my partner had access to would lock these seats in and then print them out afterwards.
Wow.
And it worked great as long as you didn't get caught. But once again, as we said on the last episode, the problem was the Ticketmaster log would reflect that when Billy Joel was sold out at 10:28, at 11:45 there was 190 tickets printed out from one particular store, and they were all good seats. Where did those come from?
Yeah.
So it eventually it caught up with us, and the show. There were 2 shows that brought us down. There were 2 different locations. There was that Joe and his brother guy who had stores down there. The guy who would look at, because you could look in the Ticketmaster machine days before, like, oh, Paul McCartney's going on sale, and see what's there and what's not there. Mm-hmm. So you would know where to try to go for. And he would say, oh, they killed it, referring to taking all the tickets. Well, it was at an REM was huge in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And it was an REM show at the Garden, and we pulled all kinds of seats. And Ticketmaster came in. And yeah. And there was the incident in Prozis, which was the Alice in Chains show. That was the GA show. And there was another guy running the machine. Farrell's software was in use, but the guy running the machine was this guy, Bob, and he was a friend of Farrell's, and he knew how to do it. And what happened was he saw the lady from Ticketmaster. There was like one lady who patrolled the North Jersey, and he literally ran away. So in other words, the tickets were still stored in the memory. And we're like, Bob, right? He's like, oh, he was he was nervous as hell.
Yeah.
That was the downfall of the Prozis machine.
Oh, no.
The tickets never got printed. They went back into the system somehow. Some deserving Alice in Chains fan got the tickets.
Yeah.
But it just went on and on. And we're not going to get to Disney World this week. We don't have enough time.
You just explained to me one of my great childhood mysteries.
What's that?
In 1997 at Stabler Arena, we lined up at about 8 a.m. for a 9 a.m. ticket on sale. And we were probably 10th in line, and we got second row seats.
Was it a TV broadcast?
No, it was a house
That would
show.
only be bought by some of these Philly guys, like the guys that were in Cherry Hill. But go ahead.
Sure.
It would still get bought.
Sure, it ended up being sold out. So eventually it sells out. 5 months later, 6 months later in August, we were in line, and we were, I would imagine, even closer. But somehow we were 5 rows from the back of the building. So, I mean,
You would think Stabler Arena would give a better cut.
yeah. They, unfortunately, it explained. I mean, WWF was scorching hot by then.
What year was that?
97. So they'd get even hotter, but that'd be the last Raw they'd have at Stabler because they went to bigger and better buildings from there. But,
Yeah. It was a dirty business. But that's,
Can I ask you a few questions about the customers?
Absolutely.
How did you find somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo or
All Yellow Pages.
Yellow Pages?
Yellow Pages and
Okay.
newspaper ads.
So you would just take out an ad, say, hey, we have tickets, call us. So a typical transaction, they'd call you, hey, I found your ad. What,
Right. Like there was no internet.
Mm-hmm.
There was no internet. So the Spice Girls are on sale for Jones Beach.
Yeah.
And people would, what do you have for the Spice Girls?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we have some, we weren't like Ronnie selling the fourth row centers 20 times. We have 15th row, right center. Those are 300. We have such and such section, 150, and we have the upper tier, which was called the second promenade, and those are 65.
Yeah.
And the people be like, give me 4 at 65.
Mm-hmm.
Or give me whatever, and you used to be able just to write orders. Like the day that PNC Arts Center and Jones Beach or the Camden one would go on sale.
The Tweeter Center.
Yes, in the 90s. It was huge. Like you could just at the PNC in Homedale, like James Taylor would always play, and Jimmy Buffett would always play, and they'd have a couple of medalist shows, and Dave Matthews would play,
Right.
And you could just say like, hey, lawn seats are X, and we have reserved seats starting at 95 and up, and often you didn't give them a section. Or if the PNC used to be the first 20 rows of the 100 numbers. We put you in the 100 numbers, no row, they're 150. And people used to see, this was the day of the sale.
Gotcha.
Because they were so frustrated from not being able, oh, that was another thing. We had sneak Ticketmaster phone numbers.
Interesting.
So the number you would get, the 212 number or the 201 number or the 609 number,
Right.
was only 609 was only supposed to get you Philadelphia events.
Huh.
The 201 or the 908 or the 212 were only supposed to get you New York City events. Well, we found a number, and it was more than one, but it was Steubenville, Ohio.
Nice.
And this Steubenville, Ohio number, like the day of Jones Beach or the PNC or Pink Floyd for New York, they would sell you the tickets.
Wow.
Even though they were only supposed to be selling like Cleveland and,
Right.
and Cincinnati.
Akron, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was all kinds of trickery. I'll tell you where they gave you a good shot, but you had to be online. And it was the Allentown Fair.
Interesting.
Even up to 10 years ago, Rush played. And I sent my good friend Fat Bald Sammy there.
Okay.
Now Sammy's like in his 60s. And he brings like these 5 other guys. They couldn't tell you a Rush song in a million years. And I got to find it. There's an article from the Morning Call about Sammy, he's a good talker. Lehigh Valley's biggest Rush fan. which also happened even on a higher level. Did I ever tell you the story about the great Pee Wee?
No.
Pee Wee, right? He was like Pee Wee. This guy died only a few years ago. He was always around, and he was didn't drink. He liked to play the horses. Didn't drink. Liked to have a good pastrami sandwich. His wife had passed away. Never was broke. Freddie knew him, and he's like, So the Yankees were going on sale for the World Series.
Oh, wow.
Or the playoffs, round 2 or something. And it must have been the World Series because Freddie sent Pee Wee. Pee Wee was willing at like 80 years old to go to stand. The tickets were going on sale Monday at 10 a.m. He was and Yankee Stadium, they were first come, first served.
Yeah.
Pee Wee was the first guy, him and another couple of friends of his. So, they had to go to the bathroom. They leave. They got their spot. And guess what? The New York, what network was Letterman on? CBS sent people down to Yankee Stadium for a news story for that weekend, and Pee Wee was and they interviewed Pee Wee, and the story played, and Letterman had him on.
No way.
I'm going to find it.
Wow.
And it's the world's greatest game. And Pee Wee, when I asked Pee Wee about it, he says, "Son, the only baseball player I knew, and it was only because I was from New York, was Babe Ruth." No, he never went to a game. He could tell you every horse that day at Aqueduct. But yeah, I'm going to find that clip of Pee Wee.
Yeah, definitely find it and share it.
And we're going to get to Disney World eventually.
Oh, well, we'll have to do it on the next episode because I think we're running a little long, but it was all good. Just some incredible stuff. I'm going to be checking out the FBI documentary you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be looking for Pee Wee. I'm going to search through those clips and see if I can help you find him. Wow. What an interesting story. I got a couple more questions, but I'll save them for next time because ask you one. How did the transactions occur? I mean, now we have PayPal, we have Venmo. Did they send a check? Did
Cash? When they called to buy tickets?
Right.
Credit card.
Credit card? Okay.
Unless you had accounts. There were certain guys you billed.
Okay.
And if you were buying broker to broker, like I knew a broker that had good Yankee tickets, and this guy, the brokers, I'll call Agar's in Union City. He has good Yankees. Or I'll call Manhattan. They got Phantom of the Opera tickets. They got a good. Those would get billed, and some of these bigger ticket agencies, like the ones I just mentioned, they would have accounts like where they would bill people. And this is back in the days where they didn't have these regulations, like with gift giving.
Oh,
with
sure.
like the stock guys.
Yeah.
And the pharmaceutical reps.
That was 2003 when the Sunshine Act happened.
Huge.
So yeah.
I had a couple of guys.
Speaking of Merck, who we mentioned earlier, that was
So we'll get to that next week.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm very interested in that because, as some of the listeners know, that's the other industry I work in,
Right.
and there's a lot of regulation around that.
Man, there was some. It was the way business was done.
The one that the Sunshine Act requires transparency in gift giving if you are a manufacturer to a provider, a healthcare provider. The one that got busted involved giving the doctor a boat, paying for their children's college tuition, and so on and so forth. But we'll get
almost like Empire Industries.
Right. Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same. And hopefully my love for Disney World won't change between now and next week, and hopefully we'll get to it. I'm excited.
Okay.
So this has been a really exciting, fun episode of Last Stop Penn Station. I want to thank AJ, our producer. Cary, I want to thank Eric from Discover Pro Wrestling.
That's right. Thanks, Eric.
And we appreciate everything he does and helps in terms of getting the notes and the social clips ready. So with that,
please subscribe. Buy some shirts. I see all these people hawking their merch. You know, we've had a few sales, but, you know, pick up a Last Stop Penn Station.
Including Dave LaGreca. Thank you,
Dave.
Dave.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I appreciate that from LaGreca.
We are under 10 Ian Micro Brawlers. So we are under 10 folks.
I think it went up from last.
Right. I think we anticipated a wave of sales. Thanks to Danhausen. Danhausen, whose Micro Brawler came, helped me move literally about 30 of them. And so thank you, Danhausen. I got word for the Micro Brawler fans that there's going to be a few more Ring of Honor ones coming out within the next couple of months. So you gotta hit up Brian. You gotta hit up Brian. They're doing these special.
When are those cards coming out?
Soon, and you're in the set.
Upcoming.
I've written your biography. So
okay. Upcoming.
And that's it for this week on Last Stop Penn Station. For more Cary and Ian and AJ, check out 55and5.com. Head over to Ad Free Shows where we do the posters of the week, and check out us next week right here on Last Stop Penn Station. Happy wrestling, everybody.
For listening to Last Stop Penn Station podcast. Rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at laststoppennstation.com.